My name is Jeff, and I've been married to Amanda for 8 years. We have 2 kids, a nice house in a quiet suburb, and from the outside, people probably think we've got it all. But lately, things have been different. At first, I tried to brush off the signs. You know, the late nights, the sudden interest in how she looks before heading out for drinks with the girls, and the way she's glued to her phone like it's her lifeline. It all seemed like nothing at first, just regular stress, or maybe her job getting more intense. But when it became a pattern, something in my gut started nagging at me. It's the little things that got me paranoid, like how she's always texting someone but never really says who it is. She's been more secretive, locking her phone and turning it away when I walk into the room. It's not like we had the perfect marriage, but I didn't think we were in trouble either. At least, not until now. So, a couple of weeks ago, I finally saw the first real crack in the facade. Amanda left her phone on the kitchen counter while she went to take a shower. Normally, I wouldn't care, but something in me couldn't let it go this time. That damn gut feeling, you know? I hesitated, felt guilty even thinking about snooping, but I couldn't shake the suspicion. When the screen lit up, I saw a text from someone named Dan. Now, here's the thing. I know all of Amanda's close friends, and I've never heard of any Dan. The message was short, simple. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. I swear, my heart just dropped. I stared at the message, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was innocent, right? Maybe it was a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew. I knew this wasn't a friendly chat. This was something else. I could barely breathe as I unlocked her phone. I'd never done this before, but I knew her passcode. It hadn't changed since the kids were born. As soon as I scrolled through her messages, it all became painfully clear. Amanda had been seeing Dan for months. Their texts were filled with all the crap you'd expect. I miss you, can't wait to be alone with you, and the one that made my blood boil. My husband's clueless. It felt like someone had punched me in the gut. All this time, she had been lying to me, coming home late, and feeding me bullshit stories about girls' nights. I sat there with her phone in my hands, my world collapsing, and realized that every suspicion I had was right. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to know more, get the full picture before I made any moves. I decided I wasn't going to be the guy who just blew up without having a plan. I wanted to make her feel what I was feeling, betrayed, exposed, vulnerable. The next morning, I decided to play it cool. If I was going to confront Amanda, I needed to do it on my terms, not in the heat of the moment. So I pretended everything was fine. I got up, made coffee like usual, kissed her on the cheek as she rushed out the door for work. But inside, I was a mess. For the next few days, I started gathering everything I could. Every time she left her phone unattended, I took screenshots of their messages, forwarded them to myself. I even went as far as checking her calendar and bank statements, piecing together every lie she'd told me over the last few months. The more I uncovered, the angrier I got, but I held it all in. Finally, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. One evening, after she got back late from another work meeting, I told her we needed to talk. She barely looked up from her phone, already giving me that dismissive look she'd perfected. "Why let me believe we were what's up?" she said, acting like nothing was wrong, as if she hadn't been seeing someone else behind my back for months that's still a family while you were off with someone else. I took a deep breath, trying to control the shaking in my hands. "Where were you tonight, Amanda?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She barely blinked. "I told you, work ran late. You know how it is." I nodded, forcing a smile, and leaned back in my chair. "Funny, because I checked your work schedule. You didn't have anything tonight. Want to try again?" That's when she froze, just for a second. It was subtle, but I saw it. The flicker of panic in her eyes. But Amanda was quick. She shrugged, keeping up the act. "All right, I forgot. I met Sarah for drinks after. It must have slipped my mind. I'll let her hang herself with that lie." "Sarah?" I asked, because I spoke to Sarah earlier, and she said she hasn't seen you in weeks. Now, I could see her starting to crack. Her face tightened, and she opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. "Amanda, I know about Dan. I know everything." Her face went pale. She stammered, trying to find the right words, but I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses. "Stop lying. Just stop," I said, my voice calm but cold. "I've seen the messages. I know about the nights you've been with him. I know about all of it. She sat there, stunned, as if she couldn't believe I'd actually figured it out. I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to decide whether to deny it or come clean. Jeff, she started, but I wasn't in the mood to listen. You know what? I interrupted. I don't even care about the details anymore. I just want to know why. Why lie to my face for months? Why let me believe we were still a family while you were off with someone else? Amanda's response? She doubled down on the lies. It's not what you think, Jeff. You said, stop, I said, standing up and staring down at her. I've had enough of the lies. I've had enough of you. After Amanda stormed off that night, I sat there in the quiet, trying to process everything. I didn't even know what to feel anymore. Anger, betrayal, sadness. It was like this mix of emotions that kept crashing into me all at once. I thought I'd feel some kind of relief finally confronting her, but I didn't. I just felt empty. For the first few hours, I just sat there, staring at the wall, replaying our conversation over and over in my head. How did we get here? How did she go from being the woman I thought I'd spend my life with to this lying, unrecognizable person? I started thinking back to when we first met, how we were back then. We couldn't get enough of each other. She was sweet, funny, always laughing at my dumb jokes. Now she was distant, cold, and every word out of her mouth felt like an insult. I don't know how long I stayed there, but eventually I went to bed. Well, I tried to. The moment my head hit the pillow, all I could see were the images I'd imagined. Her with Dan. I wondered how many times she'd kissed him, slept with him, lied to me, and come home pretending everything was fine. I wondered if she ever felt guilty, or if she just got better at hiding it. The worst part? It wasn't just the affair that broke me. It was the lies, the years of being made to feel like an idiot, like I was paranoid for even suspecting anything. All those nights she came home late, brushing me off, telling me I was overthinking things. It all made sense now. The whole time, I was right, and she made me feel like I was crazy for doubting her. The pain hit me in waves. 1 minute, I'd be furious, imagining every way I could make her and Dan pay for this. The next, I'd feel like I was drowning in sadness, wondering what I'd done wrong, what I could have done to stop it. I loved her, or at least I loved the person I thought she was. Now, I couldn't even look at her without feeling disgusted. Over the next few days, we barely spoke. She stayed with a friend for a while, giving me space, as if that would fix anything. But I wasn't looking for space. I was looking for justice. She had destroyed everything we had, and now she was just walking away like it was no big deal. No, there was no way she was getting away with this. I thought about our kids, about how this would affect them. I knew I had to be smart, keep things civil for their sake. But at the same time, I couldn't just let Amanda walk away from this unscathed. She wanted to play games? Fine, I could play too. But I wasn't going to be the one losing. Once the shock wore off, I knew I had to make a decision. Staying in this marriage wasn't an option anymore, not after everything I'd uncovered. But I wasn't going to just walk away quietly and let Amanda move on with her life like nothing had happened. No, I had to hit back, and I wanted to hit her where it hurt the most. Amanda had always been obsessed with her image. She loved being the picture-perfect suburban mom, the one who had it all together. The career, the family, the social circle. She had spent years building up this flawless reputation, both at work and with her friends. That was her weakness, and I was going to exploit it. First, I started collecting more evidence. I already had the texts, but I needed more. I started keeping track of her movements, digging through her social media, checking her bank statements, anything that would give me leverage. If she wanted to fight, I was going to make sure I came out on top. Next, I began to think about how to ruin her professionally. Amanda had a pretty high-level job at a marketing firm, where her image was everything. She'd spent years working her way up, and her career was her pride and joy. I figured if her bosses found out she was having an affair with a client, because yes, Dan was a client of hers, they wouldn't be too pleased. So, I made some calls. Anonymous tips, of course. I fed her bosses just enough information to get them curious. It didn't take long for the rumors to spread. Within a week, the office was buzzing about Amanda and her inappropriate relationship with Dan. Her career? It was teetering on the edge, and I was ready to give it one final push. But it wasn't just her job I wanted to destroy. I wanted her to feel the same betrayal and isolation I was feeling. So, I started reaching out to her family and friends. Subtly, of course. I didn't want to look like the bitter husband, but I knew how to plant seeds of doubt. A little comment here, a vague remark there. Soon, her friends started distancing themselves from her. Her family? Well, they were already suspicious about why we were having problems, so it didn't take much to get them on my side. The satisfaction of watching her life unravel was the only thing that kept me going some days. Every time she came home with that fake smile plastered on her face, I knew she was breaking down inside. She tried to act like she didn't care, but I could see it, the cracks forming in her perfect little world. She wasn't going to just lose her job. She was going to lose everything. Her reputation, her friends, her family. And I was going to make sure of it. It didn't take long for Amanda's world to start crumbling. It started small. Her coworkers began avoiding her at the office. The rumors about her affair with Dan spread like wildfire. And suddenly, the golden girl of the marketing firm wasn't looking so shiny anymore. I knew from my sources that her boss had called her in for a chat about her professionalism, though they didn't outright accuse her of anything. Still, the damage was done. Every meeting, every glance from her coworkers, it was clear they all knew. And Amanda? She acted like nothing was wrong. But I could tell. She came home quieter, more distant than ever, and every now and then I'd catch her staring off into space, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, no doubt wondering how everything had spiraled so quickly. Her friends were next to go. The same group of women she used to meet up with every week for brunches or wine nights started pulling back. I made sure to let a few choice details slip in casual conversations. Nothing too direct, just enough for them to start asking questions. It wasn't long before I started hearing through the grapevine that she wasn't invited to a few outings. The excuse? Oh, we thought you were busy, or we didn't think you'd be interested. But we both knew the truth. They didn't want to be seen with her anymore. Amanda noticed too. One night, after another failed attempt to reach out to her friends, she threw her phone down on the couch and sighed. I didn't say anything, just sipped my beer and watched her unravel in silence. Her family, though, that was the real blow. Her parents had always been a little judgmental, always keeping an eye on how their precious daughter was doing. When they found out about the affair, thanks to a well-timed conversation I had with her mother, they were furious. They hadn't raised Amanda to be the kind of woman who destroyed her family, and they let her know it. The first time she came home after visiting them, she was in tears. She tried to hide it, but I could see the red in her eyes, the way her hands trembled when she set her purse down. They'd laid into her hard, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her armor. She wasn't untouchable anymore. The perfect image she'd worked so hard to build was falling apart right in front of her, and she had no one to blame but herself. Of course, through all of this, I played the role of the oblivious husband perfectly. I wasn't mean, I wasn't cold. I was just there giving her space, offering a shoulder if she wanted it, but never pushing. She didn't know I was the one pulling the strings, and I made sure it stayed that way. And Dan? He wasn't getting off easy either. I knew he had a wife and kids. A little research, a few anonymous messages later, and his wife found out about the affair too. From what I heard, things weren't going well for him at home. Turns out, Amanda wasn't the only one whose life was crashing down. Watching everything unfold, there was a strange sense of satisfaction. I know it sounds messed up, but after what she put me through, this was the only thing that gave me some kind of peace. I wasn't just sitting back and taking it, I was hitting her where it hurt, and she had no idea it was coming from me. With Amanda's life spiraling out of control, I started to think about my next steps. My revenge was in motion, and honestly, I was starting to feel a little empty. Don't get me wrong, there was a satisfaction in watching her suffer, in seeing her face the consequences of her betrayal. But it wasn't filling the hole she had left in me. The anger, the hurt, it was still there, gnawing at me. I'd ruined her job, her social circle, her family relationships, and yet I wasn't sure what it all meant for me. I wasn't ready to forgive her. Hell, I wasn't even sure if I could. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't live in this cycle of bitterness forever. I had 2 kids to think about. They didn't deserve to get caught in the middle of this mess. For their sake, I had to figure out what kind of future I wanted, whether that meant trying to rebuild our family or tearing it apart for good. Amanda, for her part, seemed to sense that the end was coming. She wasn't the same confident, self-assured woman she used to be. Her defenses were down, and she seemed more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. A part of me hated that I still cared, that I could still feel anything other than anger toward her. But there were moments, late at night when the house was quiet, where I'd catch her sitting alone, looking lost. And it made me wonder, was there still a chance to salvage anything? One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I sat down with her. I could tell she was dreading it, knowing what was probably coming. But for once, I didn't want to fight. I just wanted answers. I needed to know why she did it. Why, Amanda? I asked, my voice quieter than I expected. Why Why now? She looked at me, eyes filled with a mix of guilt and shame. And for the first time in months, I saw the woman I had once loved, the woman I'd built a life with. I don't know, Jeff, she whispered. I don't know why. I felt disconnected. From you, from everything. It was stupid and selfish, and I ruined everything. I didn't say anything at first. I just listened, trying to make sense of her words. Was it enough? Could we come back from this? Or was I too far gone, too filled with resentment to ever look at her the same way again? I don't know if I can forgive you, I finally said, and the truth of it hung in the air between us. But I do know that I can't keep living like this, waiting for you to break down, waiting for the next lie to come out. I need to know if you're willing to fight for this marriage, or if you've already given up. Amanda didn't answer right away. She looked down at her hands, avoiding my eyes. For a moment, I thought she was going to tell me it was over, that she couldn't do it anymore. But then she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I want to try, Jeff. I want to fix this. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to try. Her words hit me hard. A part of me had been waiting to hear that, waiting for her to acknowledge that she'd shattered our lives and that it wasn't something we could just move past. But was wanting to try enough? After Amanda said she wanted to try, I didn't feel the relief I thought I would. Instead, it felt like another weight on my shoulders because wanting to fix things didn't mean we actually could. But I told her I'd give it a shot. I owed that much to our kids, at least. The first few weeks after that conversation were rough. Every time I looked at Amanda, I saw the lies, the betrayal. No matter what we did, I couldn't shake the image of her with Dan. She could apologize 1,000 times, but it didn't erase the fact that she had gone behind my back for months. We tried counseling. It was awkward at first, sitting in front of a stranger, laying out all the dirty details of our marriage. Amanda was quiet during those early sessions, hesitant to admit how far things had gone. She'd always been good at pretending everything was fine, and now she had to strip that mask off and show the mess underneath. Our counselor asked tough questions, ones that forced Amanda to face the reasons why she cheated and made me confront my own anger. And believe me, the anger was still there, boiling just beneath the surface. Some days I'd wake up and think, why am I even doing this? Why am I still here? The trust between us was shattered, and rebuilding it felt impossible. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still hiding things from me. Every time she picked up her phone, I'd feel that same paranoia creeping in. Was she texting him again? Was she still lying to me? Even if she wasn't, it didn't matter. The doubt had already sunk its claws into me. Amanda, for her part, tried. She stayed home more, kept me in the loop about where she was and who she was with, even went out of her way to prove she was cutting all ties with Dan. She blocked his number, quit the marketing firm where they worked together, and started making more of an effort to be present with the kids. But it still didn't feel real to me. It felt like she was trying to patch up a sinking ship with duct tape. One night, after the kids were asleep, we sat down in the living room. I'd been stewing in my thoughts all day, wondering if any of this was worth it. Amanda could sense it too. You're not really here, are you? She asked, her voice soft, almost defeated. I don't know, I admitted. Some days I want to try. Other days, I can't stand to look at you. The truth hung in the air between us, and for the first time, I didn't try to soften the blow. Amanda didn't say anything for a long time. She just nodded, tears filling her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She knew. She knew this was going to be harder than just saying sorry and making promises. How are we supposed to fix this, Amanda? I asked, my voice rising with frustration. How am I supposed to just forget what you did? You didn't just hurt me. You destroyed everything we built. She looked down, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know, Jeff. I don't know how to fix this, but I want to try. And that's the thing that stuck with me. She wanted to try. But for me, I wasn't sure if wanting was enough. Even after Amanda's promises and our sessions in counseling, things just weren't getting better. No matter how much we tried, there was always this wall between us, made up of all the lies, the cheating, and the resentment. I'd catch myself thinking back to the good times, the early days when we were happy. But then reality would hit me hard. Those days were gone, and no amount of counseling or trying was going to bring them back. One day, I came home from work and found Amanda sitting at the kitchen table, staring down at her phone. The look on her face told me everything. I knew she wasn't talking to Dan anymore, or at least she wasn't supposed to be, but the paranoia had never left me. It took everything in me not to accuse her right then and there. Instead, I asked, "Everything okay?" She jumped a little, clearly startled. "Yeah, just stressed," she said, setting her phone face down on the table. That one little move sent my mind racing. Why was she hiding it? What was she hiding? Stressed? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. About what? She sighed, looking exhausted. Work, the kids, us, everything. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But every part of me screamed that something wasn't right. Can I see your phone? Her eyes widened, and she hesitated. Just for a second. But that second was enough. My heart sank, and the rage I'd been trying to bury came bubbling back to the surface. Why do you need to see my phone? She asked, defensive now. Why are you hesitating, Amanda? I snapped, stepping closer. If you have nothing to hide, why can't I see it? She pulled her phone away, her expression hardening. I'm not hiding anything, Jeff. But I don't need you checking up on me all the time. That's not fair. That was at the last straw. Not fair? I spat, my voice rising. You want to talk about fair? You had an affair, Amanda. You lied to my face for months, and you want to tell me what's fair? I don't care if it's unfair. I need to know that I can trust you, and right now I don't. She stood up, her own anger starting to flare. You can't keep holding this over my head forever. I'm trying, Jeff. I'm trying to make things right, but you won't let me move past it. I'm not cheating anymore. I've been doing everything I can, and it's still not enough for you. That hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't have a comeback because she was right. No matter how much she tried, no matter how much she said she wanted to fix things, I couldn't move on. I couldn't let go of what she'd done, and honestly, I wasn't sure I ever would. We stood there, facing off, neither of us backing down. It felt like we were back at square one. No trust, no communication, just a mess of anger and bitterness. I don't know if I can keep doing this. I finally said, my voice low but firm. Every time I look at you, I see him. I see the lies. And I don't know how to move past that. Amanda's face fell, and for a moment, she looked like she was going to say something. But instead, she just nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I don't know if I can either. That was it. We both knew it. We tried, but sometimes trying isn't enough. The damage was too deep, and the trust was too broken to ever fully heal. That night, Amanda stayed at a friend's house, and I slept alone in our bed for the first time since the affair. It felt empty, but in a strange way, it also felt like the beginning of something. Maybe not something good, but at least it was real. At least we were finally done pretending. After that fight, things didn't go back to normal. In fact, it felt like we both quietly agreed that normal wasn't even an option anymore. Amanda stayed at her friend's house a few more nights, and honestly, I was relieved. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the suffocating weight of her presence in the house. I didn't have to look at her and see all the lies, the betrayal. It was just me and the kids, and even though the silence was heavy, it was a kind of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. A week passed, and one evening, Amanda came home. I knew what she was going to say before she even opened her mouth. We sat down in the living room. No yelling, no accusations, just two exhausted people who had run out of fight. I've been thinking, she said, her voice soft, like she was afraid to say the words out loud. Maybe it's time we separate. For real this time. I nodded, feeling strangely calm. I think I'd been expecting it. Maybe even hoping for it. Yeah, I think you're right. We both sat there for a while, not saying anything, just letting the weight of the decision sink in. We weren't going to be one of those couples who tried to force it for the kids. We weren't going to pretend things could ever go back to the way they were. I think we both knew that staying together wasn't helping anyone, not the kids, not us. "I'll stay with Jen for a while," Amanda said. "We'll figure out the logistics. What's best for the kids? Well, we'll be civil." It was surreal, talking about the end of our marriage like we were discussing a business deal. But in that moment, I felt more clarity than I had in months. This was a right decision. There was no going back, and honestly, I didn't want to go back. After that, things moved quickly. We told the kids, softening the blow, of course. Amanda explained that she was going to stay with a friend for a while, and that Mommy and Daddy were going to take some time apart, but they'd always be there for them. It wasn't easy, seeing the confusion in their eyes, but they handled it better than I expected. I think they could sense the tension between us for months. Maybe they'd been waiting for this too, in their own way. Amanda moved out within a few days, taking only the essentials. The house felt emptier, sure, but I also felt a sense of relief, like I could finally breathe again. There were no more awkward conversations, no more pretending. It was over, and as hard as that was to accept, it was also a weight lifted off my shoulders. We agreed to start the divorce process quietly. Neither of us wanted a messy legal battle, and for the sake of the kids, we were determined to keep things as civil as possible. I think deep down, we both knew this was the only way forward. The decision to separate wasn't easy, but it was inevitable. And while it hurt, there was a strange peace that came with it. We were finally letting go of something that had been dead for a long time, even if we hadn't admitted it to ourselves. After Amanda moved out, the silence in the house was deafening. The first night without her, I sat in the living room, surrounded by all the little pieces of our life together. Photos of the kids, the furniture we picked out, the little decorations she had insisted on buying. It was strange to think that just a few weeks ago, this had been our home. Now, it felt like a ghost of something that used to be. The kids took it hard at first, but they adjusted faster than I did. I think they were too young to really understand the full weight of what was happening. For them, it was just about having two homes now, Mom's place and Dad's place. We worked out a co-parenting schedule that gave them stability, and to my surprise, Amanda and I managed to stay civil through it all. We both knew the kids came first, and we didn't want them to feel like they had to choose sides. As for me, I had to figure out how to move forward. For so long, my life had been wrapped up in being Jeff and Amanda, and now I was just Jeff. It wasn't easy. The loneliness hit hard at first. The quiet evenings after the kids went to bed felt endless. I'd sit on the couch, staring at the TV, but not really watching anything, just letting the empty house swallow me up. But eventually, I started picking up the pieces. I reconnected with some old friends, people I hadn't really made time for during my marriage. They helped me see that there was life after Amanda, even if it didn't feel like it at first. I started going out again, even though it felt weird at first, being the single guy at the table when everyone else was still married. But it was a distraction, and at the time, that's what I needed. The biggest challenge was figuring out who I was without her. For years, everything in my life had revolved around our family, our marriage, even our problems. Now, I had to figure out what I wanted, what made me happy. I started working out more, taking better care of myself. I even picked up an old hobby, guitar. It had been years since I'd played, but getting back into it helped me focus on something other than my broken marriage. And then there were the dating apps. I wasn't sure I was ready for that, but after a few months, my friends convinced me to give it a try. It was weird, to say the least, swiping through profiles, chatting with strangers. The whole thing felt unnatural, but I wasn't looking for anything serious. Just something to get me out of the house, to remind me that life wasn't over. Still, I had moments where I felt the weight of everything. Some days I'd wake up and feel like I was back at square one, missing the life I used to have, wondering if I'd ever really move on. But each day, it got a little easier. I wasn't looking for another Amanda, or trying to replace what we had. I was just trying to figure out who I was without her, and what life could be now. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks, moments of doubt. But slowly, I started to rebuild. It wasn't the life I'd imagined when I married Amanda, but it was my life now, and I was starting to feel okay with that. While I was slowly picking up the pieces of my life, Amanda's world continued to unravel. After she moved out, it became clear that the damage from her affair wasn't something she could just walk away from. At first, I didn't pay much attention to what was happening on her end. We were civil when it came to the kids, but beyond that, I didn't ask about her life, and she didn't volunteer much information. But one evening, when she came to drop off the kids, I noticed something different about her. She looked worn out, thinner, more fragile, like the weight of everything had finally caught up to her. We exchanged the usual small talk about the kids, but just before she left, she hesitated at the door. I could tell something was on her mind. "Jeff," she said quietly, "I lost my job." I wasn't surprised. I'd known her career was on shaky ground after the rumors about her and Dan spread through her office, but hearing her say it out loud still hit me in a strange way. She had worked so hard to build her professional life, and now it was crumbling. "What happened?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "They said it wasn't about the affair, but we both know it was," she admitted, her voice trembling. "The whole office knew about me and Dan. The clients started asking questions, and eventually the higher-ups decided I was too much of a liability." There was a long pause, the weight of her words hanging between us. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt sorry for her. This was the life she had chosen, and now she was paying the price. But another part of me felt cold satisfaction. This was exactly what I had wanted when I started down this path of revenge. Now, Amanda was seeing the consequences of her actions, and it was destroying her. After that conversation, I started hearing more through the grapevine. Word got around that her friends had all but cut her off. The women she used to go out with had distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with her mess. Even her family, especially her parents, had grown colder. They were ashamed of her, and it showed. Amanda had no real support system left. It was just her, alone, trying to navigate the wreckage of the life she had blown up. Dan, the man she had risked everything for, was nowhere to be found. After his wife found out about the affair, thanks to a few well-placed tips from me, he scrambled to save his own marriage. He dropped Amanda like she was nothing. From what I heard, he'd moved out of the city to work on things with his wife. Typical. Amanda had been left holding the pieces of her broken life, and she had no one to turn to. It should have felt like a victory for me, and in a way, it did. But it also made me realize something. Revenge didn't give me the closure I thought it would. Sure, I had torn her world apart, but it didn't change what had happened. It didn't erase the pain or rebuild the trust. All it did was leave us both damaged, both dealing with the fallout of a broken marriage. As Amanda's life continued to spiral, I found myself at a crossroads. I'd achieved what I set out to do. I'd made sure she felt the same level of destruction and betrayal that I had. But the more I watched her fall apart, the more I started to question if that was really what I wanted. One day, while I was with the kids at the park, I had this moment of clarity. Watching them play, laughing without a care in the world, I realized that I didn't want their memories of this time to be filled with bitterness and anger. I didn't want them to grow up resenting one of us for what happened. I wanted them to feel secure, loved, and supported by both their parents, even if we weren't together anymore. That night, I called Amanda. She sounded tired when she answered, like she was expecting another argument. But I wasn't calling to fight. "Listen," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "We've both made mistakes. This whole thing has been a mess, but for the sake of the kids, I think we need to let go of all the anger. It's not helping anyone." She didn't say anything at first, but I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Finally, she spoke. "You're right," she said softly. "I've been holding on to a lot of guilt. I ruined everything, and I can't undo it. But I don't want the kids to suffer because of what I did." That was the first time we'd had an honest conversation in months. There was no yelling, no blaming, just two people trying to figure out how to move forward. We both agreed to put the past behind us, at least for the sake of the kids. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about finding peace. In the months that followed, Amanda and I found a new rhythm. We weren't friends exactly, but we managed to co-parent without the bitterness that had poisoned everything before. The kids started adjusting to the new normal, and slowly I began to feel like I was finally moving on. I started seeing someone new, a woman named Claire, who I'd met through a mutual friend. It wasn't serious at first, just a few dates here and there. But over time, We got closer, and I realized that I was capable of trusting someone again. Claire was kind, understanding, and, most importantly, completely different from Amanda. With her, there were no games, no lies. It felt easy in a way that I hadn't felt in years. Amanda, for her part, seemed to be figuring things out too. She found a new job, far away from the marketing industry where her reputation had been ruined. She was rebuilding, in her own way, and while we didn't talk about it much, I could tell she was making an effort to get her life back on track. One evening, when she came to pick up the kids, we had a brief conversation in the driveway. For the first time, there was no tension between us. She looked me in the eye and said, "I'm glad you're doing okay, Jeff. I know I don't deserve to say this, but I'm sorry for everything." I nodded. "I know," I said. "We both made mistakes. Let's just focus on moving forward." It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was a step towards something healthier. And that was enough for me. Looking back on everything that happened, I've come to realize a few things. Revenge, while satisfying in the moment, doesn't fix what's broken. It might give you a sense of control, but it doesn't heal the wounds. And holding on to anger only makes it harder to move forward. Amanda's betrayal changed me. It changed the way I see relationships, trust, and even myself. But it didn't destroy me. If anything, it made me stronger, strong enough to rebuild my life and find a new sense of peace. If there's one piece of advice I'd offer to anyone going through something similar, it's this: don't let the betrayal define you. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it's unfair. But in the end, you're the one who gets to decide what comes next. Focus on rebuilding your life, not on tearing down the person who hurt you. Trust me, it's the only way to really move on. And now I'm finally moving forward, one step at a time.